The galaxy had long dismissed humanity as a legend, a mere myth whispered among the elder races. Stories told of a ruthless species from a forgotten world, a race so stubborn that even the gods of entropy could not break them. No evidence of their existence remained. No homeworld, no ruins, no records. Just myths of a terrifying force that had once shaped the stars before vanishing into obscurity. For centuries, the Galactic Council had ruled unchallenged, its empires stretching across thousands of worlds. They believed themselves the pinnacle of civilization, their fleets unmatched, their technology supreme. But when the Drek Dominion launched its campaign of conquest, swallowing entire systems in flames, the Council's power began to crack. No one could stop the Drek. No one dared. Until the sky over Zenthera Prime split apart, a rift unlike anything seen before burned through space, tearing reality asunder. From its depths emerged ships unlike any the galaxy had ever known. They were not sleek and elegant like those of the Elvari, nor vast and organic like the Zorathi hive ships. No, these vessels were angular, brutal, and battle-scarred, machines of war forged in the heart of an unseen battlefield. Their hulls bore no insignia. Their weapons crackled with a power that had not been witnessed in millennia. And then, the transmission came. A single message, a voice, deep and resolute, speaking in a language thought lost to time. We are human, and we have returned. The Drek scoffed at the announcement. To them, humanity was a ghost story meant to scare the weak. They believed their own power to be absolute, so they fired the first shot. A Drek warship unleashed its plasma lances, scorching towards the lead human vessel. The blast should have melted through any known shielding, should have reduced the primitive relics to dust. But the human ship did not falter. Its armor absorbed the hit like a beast waking from slumber. And then, it retaliated. The return volley was not a sleek beam of energy, nor an elegant display of technological superiority. It was raw destruction. Kinetic rounds the size of buildings, moving so fast they burned through space itself, slammed into the Drek fleet. Shields meant to withstand the might of the Council shattered like glass. The humans did not wait. They advanced. Their ships moved with terrifying precision, formations tight, movements practiced. They did not waste a single shot. They fought with the cold efficiency of a species that had survived the impossible before. The battle did not last long. The Drek, once unstoppable, found themselves obliterated in mere hours. Their mighty flagships were reduced to floating husks. Their warlords, who had terrorized the stars for centuries, fell silent. And then, as suddenly as they had arrived, the humans spoke again. This galaxy forgot us. You erased our history. You whispered of our end. A pause. You were wrong. Across the stars, empires trembled. The legend of humanity had returned, not as myth, but as reality, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The aftermath of the battle over Zenthara Prime sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The Drek Dominion, once an unstoppable force, had been utterly crushed. What was meant to be an easy conquest had turned into a massacre. Their massacre. The Galactic Council, watching from their ivory towers, struggled to comprehend what had just occurred. The legends had spoken of humanity as a brutal but fallen species, one that had burned too brightly and consumed itself in its own wars. Yet here they were, their ships prowling the wreckage, scavenging their defeated foes with a cold efficiency. The humans had not come for diplomacy. They had not arrived seeking allies or forgiveness for their long absence. They had come as conquerors. High Chancellor Vexari of the Elvari Dominion stood in stunned silence as reports poured into the grand hall of the council. The battle had lasted only 4 hours. The Drek Armada, over 1,000 warships strong, had been eradicated. Even the most powerful empires in the Council had never achieved such a swift and decisive victory. Vexari's blood ran cold as she watched the human fleet on the holomap, their warships forming an impenetrable wall in Drek-controlled space. No hails, no diplomatic gestures, just an eerie silence, as if they were waiting for something. "Have we sent a delegation?" one of the counselors, a Zarathi broodlord, rasped. His mandibles clicked nervously, a clear sign of unease. "We attempted," Vexari said, gripping the edges of the table. "They ignored our messages. No response, no threats, nothing." "That silence is worse than any declaration of war," a reptilian counselor from the Zerath Call Syndicate growled. Vexari didn't disagree. Silence was the weapon of predators. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the UHS Retribution, Admiral Elias Varos watched as his fleet finished their sweep of the battlefield. The humans had left nothing salvageable for the enemy. What remained of the Drek fleet was now little more than floating scrap. The ship's AI, designated Omen, projected casualty reports onto his command console. Drek forces eliminated, 98% human casualties, 0.4%. Varos exhaled slowly. "That's too easy," he muttered. "They were supposed to be the apex predators of this sector." Captain Ren Vasquez, standing beside him, smirked. "They thought we were a myth, Admiral. Ghost stories don't usually shoot back." Varos wasn't smiling. They didn't understand what they were facing. Not yet. But they will. A low chime echoed across the bridge. Omen's synthetic voice broke the silence. "We have intercepted Council communications. They are watching. They are afraid." "Good," Varos said. "Let them be afraid. Let them remember." His eyes darkened as he turned toward the viewport, staring into the void where the Council's greatest empires lay. "Prepare the fleet," he commanded. "We're just getting started." For the first time in recorded history, the Galactic Council was paralyzed by fear. The humans had reappeared like wraiths from the abyss, their warships cutting through the Drek Dominion's Armada with an efficiency that defied logic. But it wasn't just their firepower that terrified the Council. It was their silence. No boasts, no threats, no ultimatums. Just the quiet, methodical destruction of anyone who stood in their path. On the Council's capital world, Zyvora, High Chancellor Vexari convened an emergency summit. The Grand Hall, usually a place of calculated politics and quiet diplomacy, was now filled with whispers of dread. Every empire had sent a representative. Even the Zorathi swarm, notorious for their disdain of the Council, had joined the gathering. A massive holographic projection displayed the latest reports. The humans hadn't stopped at the Drek Armada. They were systematically dismantling the Dominion's empire, station by station, world by world. The Drek, once feared as brutal conquerors, were now little more than prey. "This is a crisis unlike any other," Vexari said, her silver eyes scanning the room. "The humans are no longer myths. They are real, and they are advancing." A Zerathkal general clicked his claws against the stone table. "Have they made any attempt to communicate?" A tense pause followed before one of the Elvery envoys, a deep blue-skinned diplomat named Kael'Theris, shook his head. "Nothing. They don't negotiate, they don't respond, they only act." A Zorathi broodmother let out a sharp chitter. "Then they are no different than the Drek. We should unite and exterminate them before they become unstoppable." Vexari's jaw tightened. How arrogant. The Zorathi had always believed in brute force, but even they should have recognized the futility of such a plan. "You misunderstand," she said. "We do not face a mindless swarm or a warlord's ambition. We face something else entirely." The room fell silent as she gestured to the next report. The holographic display shifted, revealing grainy footage of a captured human transmission. It had been intercepted from a human ship, one of the few pieces of intel they had managed to obtain. A voice, deep and calm, filled the chamber. "We do not seek war, but we will not be forgotten." Then the screen changed again, this time showing a planet the humans had recently taken from the Drek. Instead of the expected mass slaughter, something far more chilling was unfolding. The humans were rebuilding. Factories roared to life under their control. Orbital defenses were being reconstructed. Even the local populace, many of whom had been subjugated by the Drek, were left unharmed. "This," Kael'theris muttered, staring at the image in disbelief. "This is not the work of conquerors. This is the work of an empire," Vexari finished. "A species that never died. A species that is reclaiming what it lost." The realization settled over the council like a shroud. The humans had not returned for vengeance. They had returned to rule. Far beyond the council chambers, aboard the UHS Retribution, Admiral Elias Varos watched as the planet below, once a Drek stronghold, was brought under human control. His officers worked efficiently, their movements precise, their faces hardened with the knowledge that they were carrying out something far greater than a simple campaign. This was their legacy. The galaxy had cast humanity aside, erased their history, and moved on. That mistake would not be repeated. A soft chime from the console broke his thoughts. The fleet had intercepted another transmission from the council. This one was urgent, a request for peace talks. Varos exhaled slowly, a grim smile touching his lips. "They finally understand," he murmured. Captain Vasquez raised an eyebrow. "What now, Admiral? Do we negotiate?" Varos turned to face his officers, his voice steady. "Not yet." He looked back at the viewport where the rest of the fleet loomed, their weapons gleaming in the cold void. "First," he said, "we make them remember who we are." The Galactic Council's message requesting peace talks had gone unanswered. Days passed, then weeks. Silence was all they received in return. Yet the humans did not strike. They did not invade council worlds, nor did they make demands. They simply continued their methodical dismantling of the Drek Dominion, taking system after system with brutal efficiency. The Drek, who had once terrorized the stars, were now running, scattering like insects before an oncoming fire. It was not a war, it was an eradication. The Council had never seen anything like it. Wars in the past had always been drawn-out affairs, fueled by politics, fragile alliances, and resource struggles. The humans, however, fought differently. There were no prolonged sieges, no half measures. Each battle was swift, decisive. They advanced like a force of nature, unstoppable, inevitable. Vexari, High Chancellor of the Council, could feel the weight of history pressing down on her as she reviewed the latest reports. Drek-controlled worlds taken, 42 Drek warships destroyed, 2,136 human fleet losses. Minimal, and now something even more terrifying. The Drek homeworld, Karvok 6, was under siege. It had taken the humans less than a month to do what the entire council had failed to accomplish in centuries. "They are executing them," a Zarathi broodlord hissed from across the council chamber. His mandibles twitched in unease. Every Drek warlord, every officer, wiped out without trial. And yet, Kael'theris, the Elvery diplomat, murmured, "They do not harm civilians. They do not pillage." The room fell silent as the realization settled. The humans were not conquerors in the traditional sense. They were something far worse. They were erasing an enemy from history itself. "They must be stopped," the Zarathkal general growled. "If they could do this to the Drek, they could do it to any of us." "Then perhaps," Vexari said slowly. We should stop thinking of them as a threat and start thinking of them as something else. The council turned to her, confusion evident in their expressions. She inhaled sharply, then made her decision. I will go to them myself. A hushed murmur filled the chamber. You would go to them? The Zorathi representative spat. To monsters who have ignored every attempt at diplomacy? They are not monsters, Vexari said. They are survivors, and if we do not understand them, we will all fall to them. Aboard the UHS Retribution, Admiral Elias Varos stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the battle unfold on Karvok 6. The Drek homeworld burned beneath them, its once mighty defenses crumbling. They had refused to surrender, so the humans had given them extinction. But as his officers monitored the final phase of the assault, a new signal appeared on the comms. Admiral, Captain Vasquez said, eyes widening, we're receiving a direct transmission. Varos frowned. Drek resistance? No. Vasquez swallowed. It's from the Galactic Council, and it's not just another request. Varos turned to face him fully. They're sending an envoy. Silence filled the bridge. The humans had ignored every attempt at diplomacy thus far, but now the Council was desperate enough to send someone directly. Varos exhaled slowly, considering the implications. Finally, he nodded. Let them come, he said. His gaze drifted back to the dying world below. But they won't find the same galaxy they left behind. The Galactic Council's envoy arrived under heavy escort. A lone diplomatic vessel, adorned with the sigil of the Council, exited hyperspace near the human fleet. It was a sleek and elegant craft, designed not for war, but for peace. It drifted cautiously through the void, dwarfed by the immense warships of the UHS Retribution and its Armada. Inside, High Chancellor Vexari sat rigid in her chair, her fingers tightening around the armrests. This was madness. Suicide, some had called it. No alien had ever stood before a human in known history, not in diplomatic matters, not in war. And yet, here she was. The humans did not fire upon her ship. They did not acknowledge her arrival with hostility. Instead, a single transmission crackled through the comms. Docking sequence authorized, you may proceed. The voice was cold, calculated, a warrior's voice. Vexari's second-in-command, a silver-skinned Elvari named Relan, shifted uneasily beside her. We should be prepared for an ambush. If they wanted us dead, we wouldn't have made it this far, she replied. The docking process was seamless, almost too precise. As the ship latched onto the human vessel, a hiss of decompression signaled the opening of the airlock. Then, the humans appeared. A squad of soldiers clad in black and gray armor, helmets concealing their faces, moved with perfect discipline. Their weapons were at their sides, but Vexari could feel the tension in the air. These were warriors, hardened, efficient, and ready to kill at a moment's notice. At their center stood a man she knew only by reputation, Admiral Elias Varos. His presence was like gravity itself, an unseen force pressing down on the room. His uniform bore no medals, no ostentatious display of rank, just a single insignia on his shoulder, the sigil of the United Human Systems. His gaze locked onto hers, assessing, cold, unreadable. Then he spoke. You asked for a meeting. Here we are. His voice was devoid of warmth. It was not welcoming, nor overtly hostile. It simply was. Vexari inhaled sharply and stepped forward. I am High Chancellor Vexari, representing the Galactic Council. Varos didn't blink. I know who you are. Her throat tightened. Negotiating with other empires had always been a delicate balance of charm, persuasion, and carefully measured words. But something told her none of that would work here. Then you know why I've come. Varos studied her for a moment before turning sharply. Walk with me. She hesitated only briefly before following. As they moved through the Retribution's corridors, Vexari took in her surroundings. Everything was practical, efficient, nothing wasted on aesthetics. These were not ships designed for comfort. They were instruments of war. You didn't respond to our previous messages, she said carefully. You had nothing to offer, Varos replied, without looking at her. We were busy. Busy wiping out an entire species? She shot back. Varos finally stopped, turning his sharp gaze on her. They were already dead, he said. They just didn't know it yet. Vexari's breath hitched. There was no gloating in his voice, no arrogance, just a simple, terrifying certainty. She swallowed hard. And what happens after the Drek are gone? Varos resumed walking. That depends. On what? He finally turned to face her fully, his blue eyes like ice. On whether the rest of you make the same mistakes they did. The meaning was clear. The Drek had tried to conquer humanity's domain, and they had been erased for it. The Council had always believed themselves above such crude conflicts, above wars of annihilation. But as Vexari stared into the eyes of the man leading humanity's return, she understood the truth. This was not an empire built on diplomacy or politics. This was an empire built on vengeance. And the galaxy had every reason to be afraid. Vexari had negotiated with warlords, emperors, and tyrants, but never had she stood before someone like Admiral Elias Varos. The humans were unlike any species she had encountered, not just because of their technology or their military precision, but because of the way they moved. Every step was calculated, every action measured. They carried themselves like ghosts who had returned to haunt the living. Varos led her into a dimly lit chamber, devoid of unnecessary decoration. A single table sat in the center, surrounded by utilitarian chairs. Tactical displays flickered along the walls, depicting real-time fleet movements. The Drek Dominion, once one of the greatest military forces in the galaxy, was being crushed in real time before her very eyes. Varos gestured toward a chair. Sit. Vexari hesitated before lowering herself into the seat. Varos remained standing. You came here to talk, he said. So talk. She exhaled. The Galactic Council wishes to open negotiations with humanity. For what? His voice was unreadable. You didn't care about negotiations when you erased us from your history. Vexari flinched. The Council had long treated humanity as a myth, a dead civilization, a story to frighten young diplomats into obedience. Never provoke a war you can't win, the saying had gone, or you'll end up like the humans. Now, the ghosts had returned to settle the debt. I won't deny what the Council has done, she said carefully. But we did not erase humanity out of malice. You vanished. No ruins, no remnants, no transmissions. You assumed wrong, Varos interrupted. His eyes burned cold. We were never gone. We were watching. A shiver ran down her spine. Vexari composed herself. If you were watching, then you know the Council is not your enemy. The Drek were a threat to all of us. They invaded, enslaved, and destroyed without mercy. And yet you let them. She had no response to that. Varos finally sat, resting his hands on the table. Tell me, High Chancellor, why are you really here? Vexari took a slow breath. Because the Council fears what happens after the Drek are gone. The silence stretched between them. Smart, Varos muttered. For once. He leaned back slightly. So, let's talk about the truth. Your Council doesn't want peace. It wants to contain us, to keep humanity from doing what it was always meant to do. And what exactly is that? she asked. Varos met her gaze. Take back what's ours. A cold weight settled in her chest. You believe the galaxy belongs to you? His lips curled slightly. Number, but I know what was stolen from us, and we will never let it happen again. Vexari clenched her fists under the table. She had hoped for reason, for diplomacy. Instead, she had found something worse than an enemy. She had found a civilization with a grudge deep enough to shake the stars. If humanity had returned, then war was inevitable. And the Council had no idea how to stop it. The silence in the chamber was suffocating. Vexari had never felt so helpless in a negotiation before. Every empire in the Galactic Council had its weaknesses: pride, greed, desperation for resources. She had spent her career learning to exploit those flaws, bending entire civilizations to her will through diplomacy. But the humans, they didn't need anything. They weren't desperate for trade routes, fuel, or alliances. They had arrived from the void with their fleets fully supplied, their armies disciplined, their goals singular. They were a force already prepared to take what they wanted. And that made them the most dangerous civilization the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Varos studied her, his piercing blue eyes betraying no emotion. The humans were not merely vengeful. They were patient. They had waited in the shadows for centuries. Vexari took a steadying breath. What exactly is it that humanity wants, Admiral? Varos exhaled slowly, as if considering whether she was even worth answering. We want justice. Vexari's pulse quickened. Justice. A vague, dangerous word. She leaned forward. The Drek are nearly eradicated. You've dismantled their empire, destroyed their fleets, and taken their homeworld. If this was about justice, it should be over. Varos tilted his head slightly, the hint of a smirk tugging at his lips. You think this ends with the Drek? Her blood turned to ice. Varos continued. They were just the beginning, the ones foolish enough to strike first. But the rest of you? The ones who stood by and watched? The ones who let it happen? He leaned in. You're next. Vexari's breath caught in her throat. Humanity was betrayed, Varos said, his voice measured but cold. We had allies, friends. We built an empire once, one that spanned the stars. And when the war came, when we needed help the most, the Council abandoned us. Vexari's mind raced. She had read the ancient records, the conflicting accounts of humanity's supposed fall. Some had claimed the humans destroyed themselves in war. Others said their homeworld was consumed by some unknown force. But no record spoke of an alliance, of a betrayal. Varos continued, his voice heavy with the weight of history. When the war came to our doorstep, we sent distress calls, pleas for aid. We fought alone, we died alone. Vexari swallowed hard. That was centuries ago. Varos's expression didn't change, and yet here we are. The meaning was clear. Humans never forget. A cold realization gripped her. You don't just want justice, you want retribution. Varos didn't deny it. Instead, he simply said, we will make sure no species ever forgets humanity again. A heavy silence filled the chamber. Vexari had come here hoping to find common ground, but now she saw the truth. This wasn't just about vengeance. It wasn't even about war. Humanity was reclaiming its place in the galaxy, and the Council had two choices: bend the knee or be swept away. Her voice was barely above a whisper. What happens now? Varos stood. Now? He looked toward the holo display, where human fleets were already moving toward new systems. Now, you decide whether you want to survive the new order, or be part of the ruins we leave behind. Vexari had never feared anything in her life. Until now. Vexari had always considered herself a master of diplomacy, but for the first time in her life, She felt like a novice standing before something she could not negotiate with. Admiral Varos and his people did not operate like the other civilizations of the Council. They did not seek political maneuvering, resources, or trade. They did not beg for recognition or ask for a seat at the table. They were here to take what had been denied to them. The cold certainty in Varos's voice sent a shiver through her bones. "You misunderstand, Admiral," she said carefully, choosing her words like a surgeon handling a blade. "The current council is not the one that abandoned you. We are willing to acknowledge our mistakes, to forge a new relationship with humanity." Varos exhaled sharply, almost amused. "A relationship? Like the one you had with the Drek?" Her breath caught. He knows. He knew the truth. The Council had allowed the Drek to expand their war machine unchecked. They had turned a blind eye when the Drek enslaved lesser races. They had only acted once the Drek grew too powerful to control. She had assumed no one would ever challenge the Council's hypocrisy. But humanity had not forgotten. "Your council is built on convenience, not justice," Varos said. His tone wasn't angry, nor did it carry any theatrical weight. It was just a simple statement of fact. "You tolerated the Drek until they became a threat to you. You erased us from history because it was easier than acknowledging your failure." Vexari clenched her jaw, struggling to maintain her composure. "That does not mean war is the only path forward." Varos regarded her for a long moment. Then he turned to the holo display, tapping the controls. The image shifted, revealing a strategic map of the galaxy. Red zones marked the Drek territories that had already fallen. Blue icons, human fleets, were now appearing in systems once thought unreachable, expanding, advancing. "Tell me, High Chancellor," Varos said, still looking at the map. "Do you know what happened to Earth?" Vexari hesitated. "No." Varos finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Neither do we." The admission sent a chill through her. "Our homeworld was lost," he continued. "Not destroyed, not wiped from existence. Lost." Vexari's mind raced. That shouldn't be possible. No planet, especially one as important as humanity's cradle, could simply disappear. Varos leaned forward, his voice dropping to a quiet intensity. "We searched for centuries, through the ruins of our old colonies, through the wreckage of a civilization that should have never fallen. But Earth was gone. No records, no coordinates, no trace." A sharp silence followed. And then Varos spoke the words that made Vexari's blood run cold. "And we think the Council had something to do with it." Her breath hitched. "That's impossible. You don't know your own history, Chancellor," Varos interrupted, his gaze piercing. "But we do. We dug through the ruins, through archives you thought were lost. Someone removed Earth from the galactic record. Someone made sure we could never return home." Vexari felt the walls closing in around her. This was bigger than a simple war for power. The humans weren't just reclaiming their empire, they were hunting for the truth. And when they found it, nothing in the galaxy would be safe. She exhaled shakily. If the Council was involved in the disappearance of Earth, I swear to you, I will uncover the truth." Varos studied her for a long moment. Then, for the first time, he smiled. A small, knowing, dangerous smile. "You'll try?" he said. Then he stood, nodding toward the door. "We're done here. You can return to your council and tell them the same thing we've told every other empire that stood in our way." Vexari swallowed hard. "And what is that?" Varos's expression turned to steel. "Humanity is back, and we are not asking for permission." Vexari left the retribution with the weight of an entire civilization pressing down on her shoulders. The moment she stepped back onto her diplomatic vessel, she could feel the eyes of her crew on her. Expecting answers, hoping for good news, she had none. "High Chancellor?" Relan, her second-in-command, approached her cautiously. What did they say? Vexari sat down slowly, rubbing her temples. Everything we feared. And worse. She had gone to negotiate peace, but peace had never been an option. The humans weren't interested in treaties, in alliances, or in restoring balance to the galaxy. They wanted justice. They wanted vengeance. And most terrifying of all, they wanted the truth. She turned to Relan. Contact the Council. Convene an emergency session. Now. The Council chamber was in chaos the moment her image flickered into the hologrid. Did they agree to stand down? Are they open to negotiations? Can they be reasoned with? Vexari clenched her fists. Number, the humans are not here to negotiate. The chamber exploded into frantic murmurs. Some of the council members had still clung to the belief that this was all some elaborate posturing, that humanity could be bought, threatened, or persuaded into submission. They were wrong. The Drek are finished, Vexari continued. Their empire is gone, their fleets shattered. The humans will wipe out whatever remains of them within the next few weeks. A Zarathi broodmother clicked her mandibles anxiously. And then what? Vexari took a slow breath. Then, they come for us. The room fell silent. Impossible, growled a Zerath Kal warlord. We have committed no crimes against them. Vexari turned her sharp gaze to him. Did you stand against the Drek when they expanded? The warlord hesitated. Did you lift a single claw to stop them? Did any of us? Silence. The answer was clear. You don't understand, Vexari said, her voice barely above a whisper. They believe we let their people die. They think we erased them from history. And now they are tearing through this galaxy like a force of nature, because they will never let that happen again. A nervous diplomat from the Elvari Dominion hesitated. If they cannot be reasoned with, then we must prepare for war. War? The Zarathi broodmother spat. Against them? You saw what they did to the Drek? No species in this council has the fleet strength to match them. The warlord slammed a clawed fist onto the table. Then we unite. A combined council force could what? Vexari snapped. Delay them? Slow them down? She leaned forward, her silver eyes burning. The humans do not fight wars like we do. They do not conquer for territory. They do not seek resources. They do not play political games. She let her words sink in before delivering the final blow. They fight to win, and they do not stop until their enemies are dust. A heavy silence followed. The realization was finally settling in. This was no longer a question of politics or strategy. The galaxy had one choice: survive under the shadow of humanity's return, or be erased. Far from the Council's desperate deliberations, Admiral Elias Varos stood on the bridge of the Retribution, staring at the cold expanse of space. How did the Chancellor take it? Captain Vasquez asked beside him. Varos smirked slightly. Exactly as expected. He turned to the holomap before him. The Drek Dominion was collapsing, but that was just the beginning. We have our next targets, he murmured. Their alliances are fragile. Their fleets are disorganized. They have no idea how to fight what's coming. Vasquez exhaled. They will, soon enough. Too late for them, Varos replied. He watched as the next set of human fleets activated their jump sequences, preparing to expand deeper into Council space. Let them panic, he thought. Let them scramble to form coalitions, to prepare their defenses. It wouldn't matter, because humanity was back. And this time, they were taking everything. The Galactic Council was falling apart. In the days following High Chancellor Vexari's return, fear spread like wildfire. Empires that had once ruled the stars with unshakable confidence were now paralyzed, scrambling to make sense of the impossible reality before them. Humanity wasn't just back. They were winning. The Drek were gone, completely and utterly eradicated. Their homeworld, Karvok 6, had been bombarded from orbit, their last warlords executed, their fleets hunted to extinction. Not even the Zorathi swarm, infamous for their ruthlessness, had ever wiped out an entire species so efficiently. And now, the humans were advancing deeper into Council space. Fleet by fleet, system by system, they expanded with a terrifying purpose. But they weren't mindless conquerors. They weren't slaughtering civilians. They weren't enslaving the weak. No, they were doing something far worse. They were rewriting the balance of power itself. Vexari stood in the heart of the council chamber, watching as chaos unfolded around her. "Half our members are considering surrender," an enraged Zorathi general hissed. "They're abandoning their colonies, evacuating entire systems. The humans are absorbing these worlds without resistance," a Zorathkal admiral added, his scaled face grim. "No occupation forces, no war crimes, just assimilation." Vexari's hands trembled. They're building something. The humans weren't destroying civilizations. They were recruiting them. Already multiple planets had voluntarily joined the united human systems. Why? Because unlike the Council, the humans had proven they could protect them. The Drek had terrorized the stars for centuries, and the Council had done nothing. Humanity had erased them in a month. For many, that was all the proof they needed. A new power was rising. One built on retribution, on justice, on the promise that never again would the weak suffer at the hands of the strong. And people were choosing to stand with humanity. Aboard the UHS Retribution, Admiral Varos watched as another Council world lowered its defenses. The planetary governor, a nervous-looking Elvari, appeared on the holoscreen. His voice wavered. We surrender. Our people do not wish to resist you." Varos nodded. "Then you won't have to." With a single command, human ships began landing on the surface, not with weapons drawn, but with supplies, engineers, and medical personnel. Another world, another system claimed without firing a shot. Vasquez exhaled beside him. "They're surrendering faster than expected." "They were never loyal to the Council," Varos replied. "They were afraid of the Council." Vasquez smirked. "And now they're afraid of us?" Varos shook his head. Now they trust us." That was the difference. The Council had ruled through bureaucracy, through politics, through empty promises of peace. Humanity ruled through action, through certainty. They didn't negotiate with tyrants, they ended them. And the galaxy was beginning to realize that maybe, just maybe, humanity wasn't the threat. Maybe they were the solution. Back in the council chamber, Vexari listened to the frantic debates. Their influence is growing too fast. They've already absorbed 5 independent systems without a fight. This is worse than an invasion. This is conversion. Vexari's heart pounded. The old powers were losing control. The Council's authority was crumbling, and she knew the truth no one wanted to admit. There was no stopping humanity's return. There were only 2 options left: fight and be destroyed, or kneel and survive. She closed her eyes, realizing what had to be done. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but firm. We need to open real negotiations with humanity, not as rulers of the galaxy, but as survivors looking for a place in their new order. The chamber exploded with protests, but deep down, every leader present knew the same thing. The war was over before it had even begun. Humanity had already won. The Galactic Council fractured under the weight of its own fear. Empires that had ruled for millennia found themselves irrelevant in the face of humanity's relentless advance. Some tried to resist, sending their fleets into doomed battles, but it only accelerated their downfall. Others surrendered, their leaders vanishing into obscurity as their worlds were quietly absorbed into the united human systems. And some, like High Chancellor Vexari, chose a different path. She stood on the bridge of the UHS Retribution, staring out at the vast armada of human warships stretching into the void. Admiral Varos stood beside her, silent, unreadable. She had fought against this moment for as long as she could, had tried to convince herself that the Council could survive, that diplomacy could prevail. But humanity had never been here to negotiate. They had come to reclaim what was theirs. "Why did you let me live?" she asked finally. Varos exhaled, his gaze fixed on the stars. "Because we don't want a graveyard," he said. "We want a future." She turned to him, searching his face for deception. She found none. Humanity could have burned the galaxy down, wiped every species that had betrayed them from existence. But instead they had done something far worse. They had changed everything. For centuries, the Council had ruled through politics and deception. Now that system was gone. In its place stood an empire forged in war, one that had waited in the shadows for its time to rise again. And now that time had come. Vexari took a deep breath. "And what happens now?" Varos finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Now?" he said. "Now we build." The era of the Galactic Council was over. The era of humanity had begun, and the stars would never be the same again.